I was like, well, I'll do it. When do you need it? And he said, tomorrow. I'm like, okay, do you have any video or anything you could show me? He's like, no, I don't have video, but it's like, action music and drums and stuff. So literally me and a couple of friends stayed up all night and we just wrote everything we could think of.
He's part of the jazz group Third Horse. He's also composed music for huge shows like NCIS LA and Shark Week, and had clients like Samsung, McDonald's, Netflix, and Marvel, to name a few. Please welcome Craig Dobbin to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Amazing. Great to be here. Really is.
Yeah, great to have you here, talk to you, learn about what like a great career you've had so far, and I'm sure it'll be even greater going forward. Um, First question that I ask all my guests, just what was your first experience with music like, or what was the moment that really made you want to like get into music as a living?
Okay, great. Well, so two answers to that. It was like my first experience with music was literally, I don't have a very musical family, but my grandmother had a piano at her house and I was just obsessed with it. I would like to go over and just plunk out notes and figure out things so it was like, I think even for my like second or third birthday, I asked for a toy saxophone and they couldn't find one. So they gave me a toy piano. So there's always been this kind of pull towards music, never really as a career. It wasn't until I got into high school and I went to a small boarding high school up in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. There was no music program to speak of, and there was they had, so Steamboat Springs is a ski area, and there's a lot of clubs and bars and stuff that are open in the winter, and so like jazz and groups would come through town to play those clubs. And there was a woman in town who had this place she called the Barn, which was basically just a cheap place for musicians to stay as they came through Steamboat. And there was a traveling jazz musician, Oscar, who was coming through town, and he was going to stay for a while, and he decided to start a glee club out up at our school. And it was, I joined because anything musical I wanted to be a part of.
Yeah.
And then he said, hey, I'm going to offer this music class, and he came up and he was like, I'm gonna do it sixth period. And I had a required class sixth period and I couldn't take it. So I went up to him and was like, oh, can we do it fifth period? Because I can't do it sixth period. And he said, no, sorry, I've already got people in it sixth period. I'm like, oh, well, I hope you stay because I'd love to take your class. He came up to me the next day and he was like, tell you what, if you're really interested, just you and I will get together in fifth period and we'll just, and I had like this all 3/4 of a year with him of just exposing me to music and teaching me about like, I mean, I- modern and classical and romantic. And he then went around the school and figured out everyone who played a musical instrument. Like, okay, this girl plays the violin, but not very well. This is a flute player. We got 2 guitar players, a drummer, like 3 keyboard players. And he put together these strange ensembles of like, violin, flute, couple pianos, guitars, and say, okay, write for this ensemble. So, I would figure out how to write for all those individual instruments. And by the
Yeah.
time I was like, at the end of high school, I'm like, all right, let's give this music thing a shot because I'm really, really enjoying it. So then I came out to California and studied music.
Yeah. Well, that's a great way to, sort of be limited in a way with like these are the instruments you have, what can you do with it? I'm sure that really helped like your development in music, like learning what works with certain instruments or certain combinations of them. And I just wonder, like, you've composed for a huge, like, variety of genres. You've done like action stuff, horror stuff, really like kid-friendly stuff. How do you sort of, you know, have such a wide variety that you can compose for and know like sounds for all these different types of films?
That's a good question. It's like I don't think I've ever, I mean, music is music, right? It's like,
Yeah.
there is a language of music. It's kind of like, I don't know, it's like learning a different language. It's like you can go out, you can speak English and then go learn French. And it's just like there's a certain musical language associated with kids music and a certain musical language associated with action and drama and sharks and I've just always like, if I don't know it, I'll study it and figure out what are they doing there? Why are they doing that? What do I like about that? What works about that? What can I do differently? So, even when I started doing kids music, I had never done kids music before, but I'd watched a ton of cartoons. It's like, so at least the musical language was in my head. So then
Mhm.
it's just figuring out and breaking down the elements until at least I had my own take on it, to do JJ the Jet Plane or Bessie's Kindergarten Adventures or any of those early shows that I did.
Hey, if you're like me and you're interested in the YouTube or creator space, you should check out The Published Press. The Published Press is a completely free newsletter founded by YouTubers Colin and Samir. They host their own podcast talking to some of YouTube's largest creators. They've edited some of the best content I've seen on YouTube, and now they're sharing their knowledge about the YouTube space with you for free. The Published Press comes out 3 times a week, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, with everything going on with your favorite creators and platforms. And like I said, it's completely free. Just enter your email address to receive the Published Press whenever it comes out, and that's it. So, what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below, sign up to the Published Press, and get all the info you need on the industry. I mean, you've worked for those, you've also worked for, like I said, NCIS LA. What's it like to work on such a big show, such like a basically a primetime show, but have your job be a bit more like behind the scenes, something that isn't always like appreciated or recognized?
Totally. Well, I mean, it really is. It's like I'm always aware that my job is to realize someone else's vision. I mean, there's someone else who's like has a vision for the show, and my job is to enhance what they're out to accomplish. So, ask a bunch of questions of the producers, like, what are you looking for emotionally in this moment? Do you like this? Should we push it more this way? And until we really have agreed on what we're doing. The most when you talk about a big show like NCIS, the thing about that show that's been the most interesting to me is having worked on smaller shows, there's a lot of interaction with the director and producer on a smaller show. And it's like they want to come and they want to hear and they want to make changes. And with NCIS, it's literally everyone's at a certain level professionally. I think they just expect everyone to do great work. So they pretty much leave you alone. I mean, the producer, I just finished an episode of NCIS LA and delivered it. And the producer literally will not hear it until they're doing the final mix on Thursday. And so he'll only have like an hour or two to tweak anything. And
Yeah.
pretty much it's like they trust us to do what we know to do best. And I don't know, the show's been going for 14 seasons. I've been on it for 7. So there is an established world of what
Yeah.
you
There
would expect.
there's like a template or a rhythm to it that you sort of can get the feel of, and sort of like you said, there's a big element of trust. It's sort of saying, hey, if I give this to Craig, like I don't need, a week and multiple versions to go over it and over it. I sort of just trust that he'll do a good job with it, get the sound right, the mood right of everything, like that.
Exactly. Exactly.
So whether it's, being a musician, like playing music, or something more like composition or scoring, what tips or advice would you give to someone just starting their music career?
Well, so I mean, the first thing is really I always consider like succeeding in the music business. Like you get in a line, right? And you just are like there and you're slugging away. And most people seem to give up at some point. It's like at some point it's like, I just need money or I need to get a job or something. I really believe that if you keep at it, if you stay there in the line, eventually an opportunity will present itself to you when you're ready for it. And as long as you're prepared for it, and even if you're not prepared for it, I mean, it's like the first time I did a score, I had no idea what I was doing. They said, "Hey, can you do music for this?" And I'm like, "Sure." And then I'm like, "Oh my God, how do you do music for this? I gotta figure it out."
Yeah,
So, it's like, and trust yourself to be able to figure those things out. And, I ultimately, the one thing about me is like everyone goes, "Who's your agent? Who's your manager?" I've never had an agent or a manager. It's always been nurturing relationships with the people I work for. If you get a client like the guy I do Shark Week for, Jeff Kerr, we've been doing Shark Week shows for 33 years. And he was a local Ventura news producer, and I had never really done anything, and they matched us together. But we developed a relationship and a rapport so that, it's like when he says, I want it to be whatever adjective he used, like if he says blue, I understand him. I understand
Yeah.
what he means when he says that. And that's invaluable when you're working with people. If you actually are able to create these relationships with your clients, I mean, they'll keep calling you
Mm.
because it's
Yeah, have a chemistry where you sort of just understand them or know what they're going for. That definitely makes it easier and for both parties and sort of just helps it maybe become like a better final product in general.
totally. And then the
So
other thing I've often told people, it's like, it's better to do, at least when you're dealing with post-production, if you're doing music for film or TV or commercials, I mean, you're one of the last people to work on the project. It's been edited, there's everything that's happened, and you it's better to do good music that's on time than great music that's late.
yeah,
It's like because if you can't miss deadlines when you're at that late. I mean, it's like, when
yeah,
have you ever turned on the TV and said, "Sorry, we're not running an episode of NCIS Los Angeles because composer needed more time." It just doesn't happen.
yeah.
And so it really is critical to be able to do good music under those deadlines.
Are you a music artist trying to find a way to get your music on as many streaming platforms as possible? Then check out DistroKid. DistroKid is a super user-friendly and super easy-to-use service that will make your music available in stores like Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes, Amazon Music, YouTube, Snapchat, everything. Everything you could imagine, it's available. People will even be able to add your songs into their Instagram stories. DistroKid helps you with the distribution, monetization, and promotion of all of your music. Use the link in the description of this video for 7% off any DistroKid package you want. Pick from musician packages designed to help artists get their own music out there, or even get a label package where you can manage up to 100 artists from one profile. So that's more for like managers, labels, and you can also get the musician package that I mentioned earlier, which is more for artists, producers, things like that. And super easy, and you can get 7% off any package right now with the link in the description of this video. So once again, if you're looking for a way to get your music on as many streaming platforms as possible, I'm talking any platform you can think of, get DistroKid and get 7% off right now with the link in the description. Back to the program. You mentioned your first job and like not really knowing what you were doing, but
Mhm.
that first show you got or movie, what was that like and how did that job come about to get it?
I was, let's see, I think I was still a senior at UCSB. I was working in a local music store selling music equipment, and someone one day walked into the music store and they're like, "I want this mixing board and I want this effects rack," and it was like, and I worked on commission, so I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it's gonna be a great day." And then all of a sudden he goes in, "Hey, do you know anyone who does music for TV? I'm doing a documentary about rafting down the Zaire for A&E channel." And I was like, "Well, I'll do it. When do you need it?" And he said, "Tomorrow." I'm like, "Okay, do you have any video or anything you could show me?" He's like, "No, I don't have video, but it's like, action music and drums and stuff." So literally me and a couple of friends stayed up all night and we just wrote everything we could think of. I mean, it's just like we put all this stuff and then we went down to the studio in Ventura the next day and just started putting stuff against the screen where they wanted music. And it was just amazing how much actually worked. I mean, there was a couple of scenes that it almost felt like it was actually composed for that scene. And
Yeah.
so they were like, "This is great. We love this. We'd love to do more stuff with you." And so they just started, as they got more work, started feeding us other documentaries. And that was the producer that they called me once and said, hey, Discovery Channel's talking about doing like a week of shark documentaries and calling it Shark Week, and we want to do something for it. And they paired me with this producer, and that was how Shark Week came about. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And I think it's great that when you had that opportunity, you didn't hear tomorrow being the deadline and we're like, "Oh god, I can't do this." You sort of just sat down and committed to it and you're like, "All right, I guess I have to get this done by tomorrow." And you knocked it out that night.
that's right.
Um,
That's where that
so
expression, ever heard that expression, throwing your hat over the wall? It was like, Italians used to be, it's like if they couldn't get over this wall, they'd throw their hat over it because then they'd have to get over the wall. So when you say something, it's like, I don't know how I'm gonna do it, but I'm giving my word to do it. And then you just
yeah,
put it out.
yeah. And apart from composition, you also are just a jazz musician with your group Third Force. How did that group start? How did you started just that whole like origin story basically?
So I was, when I was in college, I had become an expert in what was called MIDI studios. Like the whole advent of MIDI was just coming out where you could connect all these MIDI devices to your
Yeah.
computer and start to work it. And a lot of studios didn't understand it. And I did. So they would hire me a lot to go out to these recording studios around Santa Barbara and help set up their MIDI stuff. And, I was working in a studio, Wizard Productions, who was affiliated with a record label, Higher Octave, and, I was paired with this producer, William Mora, and, I was up there helping with the session, making sure the MIDI stuff worked and all that, and, we were finishing up one night, it was just the 2 of us in the studio, and I said we were talking about music, and I said, "Hey, I wrote this cool song." It was like, sampling beats was just starting at the time where people could sample
Yeah.
drum groups, and, it was mostly in that kinda hip hop world, and I was like, "Well, what if you took, like, sampled grooves and you did, like, pretty new age music over the top of it? What would that be like?" And so I was writing these kind of, like, I guess, the modern term for it would be chill music because it was just kind of groovy ambient music. And I played something for William, and he said, "Wow, I really like this. We should start working together." And so at nights when, we were done with whatever bands we were working on, we'd start writing, and eventually we had 10 songs, and we presented it to the label that we were working for. They said, "This is great," and they signed us, and we just came up with the name Third Force for ourselves, and then just started releasing stuff. And at the time, there was no genre called smooth jazz, and, that we thought we were doing new age music with beats, but that was the radio format they like 94.7 The Wave was just coming out in LA, and they picked up our record and started playing it a lot. So all of a sudden I'm like, "Oh, I guess we're smooth jazz artists." And that became the origin of Third Force. And
Mhm.
that's kind of my passion project. I mean, it's what I do in between scoring gigs just as like for me or for, art for art's sake. That's not on such a critical deadline like films
Yeah.
are.
Something you can have a bit more fun with and you're not, you know, you don't have a deadline for you're just sort of playing to have fun, like you said,
Totally.
between gigs. So, I mean, coming up with that name Third Force, was that just sort of like spur of the moment what you thought of, or was there more of like a meaning to it that made you come up with that?
That's a really good question. Eh, yes, there is definitely a meaning. The whole band was established. When we started working on it, it was myself and William, and we brought in a third guy, a Dutch kind of electronic producer named Elena Eskenazi. And we, the whole band was formed in the spirit of collaboration. Because what we said is if 2 people get together to collaborate on a piece of music, the result is bigger than the sum of the 2. There's a third force that's involved when you bring people together that creates an energy bigger than what a collaboration is. So third force is really the whole concept behind collaboration. And you'll see in our music, we always bring in other artists and feature artists because we're really big on being able to collaborate, because we think that when you bring people in and enable them, give them a free expression, not like a hired gun, not like, "Here's the part I want you to play. What do you hear?
Yeah.
you do here? What would be, and, it's like some of the greatest moments in our songs have come out that way. Like, we had, a great guitarist, Peter White, we had brought him in to play on a piece that we were in called Here Comes the Night, and we were sitting in the studio listening, beautiful nylon guitar performance he did, and we said, "What do you hear on this, Peter?" And he goes, "Well, I hear accordion." And we all laughed, thought he was joking. And he was like, "No, I'm serious." And he went in and he played this lyrical, ambient, beautiful accordion part, but we never would have thought of that. That's the third force that comes out in those collaborations that makes it better than you could have imagined.
Mhm, mhm. And you mentioned, like, loving collaborations with these people. Is there a difference in your creative process, like, when you're just playing with third force versus bring, like, other new people in and trying to collaborate on a song?
Yeah, I mean, it's like film scoring, it can be a really lonely job. I mean, it's like, late nights in a room all by myself and my TV trying to figure out what works in any given scene. So it really is. It's like the joy of collaboration is you get a fresh perspective. And I don't know, there's this thing that happens when you bring someone else to listen to music where, I mean, you write music too. So it's like, have you ever, like, when you play it for someone, it sounds different. It's almost like you're listening
Yeah,
to
yeah,
somebody else's ears. So it's like that. When you have a collaborator, you're not limited to your own perspective. It's almost like you get to hear it through someone else's perspective and hear it in a different way, which is always just so refreshing. I get so sick of the way I listen to things. It's so nice to listen to the way somebody else does.
yeah. And I listened to something about, like, video editing or, like, film editing, and they were like, "Well, once you have, like, an edit or draft or something, bring someone in to watch it, and if you're ever, like, unsure of something or you're like, 'Okay, I need to change it,' because that's, like, having someone there next to you while you're, like, watching it or getting their first reaction, it can really tell you, like, what you need to change. So I guess it goes to the same thing for, like, music. If there's, a part of the song where someone's listening and they sort of start to, like, get bored or start thinking of something else, you're like, "Okay, I gotta change that. I gotta add something there so that it
Totally.
can keep their attention."
Totally, or even, I mean, I don't know if you've Rick Rubin wrote that book on creativity, and one of the
Yeah.
things he said, which I just think is so great, is he's like, "Give yourself 2 options." He goes, "Don't give yourself 1,000,000, get 2." And then he goes, "Flip a coin." And I thought where this was going was just pick the one that the coin lands on. And he goes, "No, when the coin's in the air, you'll see that you hope it's one way or the other." And it's like, "Oh, I hope it's heads." Up, that's the way you should go, because it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, internal knowing. Even when you bring someone else in,
Or
if
yeah.
they don't reflect the boredom, I'll cringe at something and I'll go, "Oh, all right, I really do have
Yeah.
to deal with that because I'm embarrassed that they just watched it." So,
Yeah. Or when you're, like, flipping a coin and it lands on, like, heads, let's say, and you're like, "Alright, 2 out of 3, so let's see if tails can do it." Then you know that, okay, maybe, like, tails is the one to go with. Um,
exactly. Exactly.
and, so, like, with Third Force, you say it's more of a passion project and whatnot, but you actually, at one point, had an album go to number 1 on the contemporary jazz charts. What was that moment like for you to, see something that you made get so much attention?
It really was, so how that came about was, we had started the group in 1993, and, we had definitely had some stuff that was charting. We got, like, 1 up to number 3, and then 1 up to number 2, and then it was just like, get breaking that number 1 spot was just, it seemed so far away. And, as the music industry changed and as labels collapsed and Smalls got bought up, I mean, it's like we lost our record deal because our label went away. Higher Octave got bought by Capitol, which got bought by EMI, which merged. And it was like eventually we were just dropped from the label. And we thought, okay, well, that was a really good run. That was really great. And uh that was 2006, I think, was when our deal ended. And I don't know, one day William came over, and we just started writing songs, not for any reason, not for a record. We didn't have a record deal. We weren't doing anything. We just said, well, hey, let's get together and write some songs. Let's see if we still enjoy playing together. And we did. And then we had like 6 or 7 songs. And we're like, should we keep going? Yeah, let's keep going. And then we got to a point, it's like, should we invite some people to play on them? Yeah, let's invite some people to play on them. And like at some point, we're like, I think we're going to finish a record now. And so we just like literally over the course of maybe 2 years, like started writing and finishing music. And then finally we had 10 songs. They were mixed. We had them ready for mastering, ready to go. And one of the artist that played on it, a guitar player, Lawson Rollins, said, "You should call my record label. I bet they'd like to sign you guys." And so we did. We went to the Baja TSR. We went to the owner's Tom's house and played him the record and sat there and listened to him, watched him listen to it. And he just looked at us and said, "Yeah, I'd love to release this." And we were like, all right. And this was 10 years. So this was 2016, 10 years after the previous record. And to watch it just like shoot straight up to the top, it was a really quick, we were literally blown away. So it was, I
Mhm.
mean, it's a very gratifying moment that after 10 years of not releasing anything, that the record that we released had was so well received.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome, and it's awesome that, like, spending so much time on it really paid off for you and had such, like, a great reward at the end, uh, that you sort of get this praise, I guess, of, like, being number 1 on, charts.
And we weren't writing it to we didn't even know if we were releasing it. So there
Yeah.
wasn't just like, what do we got to do to make a number one hit? It
It
was like,
wasn't
what?
yeah, it was let's get together and have some fun making music. It wasn't let's make a number 1 song. It was just
Totally.
playing to play. And,
Totally.
now it seems like music's, like, super accessible and that, we've sort of heard everything or, you listen to something and you're like, "Oh, that reminds me of this," which is, like, based off of this. It just seems like there's not really anything really new. How do you continue to try to innovate in like your composing and scoring?
I just listen to a ton of music and just try to see, wow, that's an interesting idea I haven't explored. Or and I also buy a ton of sounds. I mean, sounds open up a whole world. Sometimes it's like you find a sound that creates an idea that you didn't necessarily think of. I mean, it really is. I it's challenging to keep creating new stuff, but, I don't know, even on this latest episode of NCIS, I have a palette of what I call just swooshes and rolls and stuff, and I know where the ones I like are, and I always use them, and I accidentally, like, hit below where I normally play, and I was like, "Wait, there's sounds down there? I didn't even know there were stuff." And I found all these cool things, like new sonic avenues that I
Yeah.
can explore even on this episode. I mean, there's only 3 episodes left in the series, and, already found a way to put something new into it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome that you still, even if accidentally, you find new ways to, you know, expand like what sounds you're using and sort of just like what's accessible to you.
Totally.
Uh, just sort of like a dream scenario or hypothetical question for you. If you could like compose for any show or movie in the world, what would you want to compose for?
Oh my gosh. If I could compose for any show or movie, what would I wanna compose for? Well, I think it would really be fun. I would love to do a take on a superhero something. I don't even care what it is, but I haven't
Hmm.
explored the superhero genre. And I love writing epic heroic music. So it's like and NCIS doesn't really call for that kind of level of like epicness. So
Yeah,
that would be a fun genre to explore. I mean, for whoever's doing it. I mean, wouldn't it be so cool to do a MCU or a DCU movie? It would be
yeah,
would be epic.
yeah. And I get like watching movies like that, maybe that it's epic or just anything that has like a great soundtrack that makes you feel. Does when you're watching something like that, does that sort of distract you from the movie itself? Do you start listening to the soundtrack and you're like, "Wow, I wonder, like, how they made this," or I wonder what the composer was thinking? Does that ever happen to you?
Sometimes, and it's annoying, but, it's kind of my l look, I love movies. I just which is why I love good TV shows, I love movies, and I love a story that captivates me where I don't hear that at all. Like, I'm completely wrapped up in the story, and the music doesn't distract me. Like, I don't know, I watched the last episode of The Last of Us last night, and, I won't spoil anything here, but there was one, uh the only thing that pulled me out the whole episode, which was awesome, was there was a permutation of the opening credits theme that was used over a really climactic moment near the end that was done in a really cool way. And it was just like, oh, wait, there's the main theme, and he's changed it this way, and he's
Yeah.
utilizing it here, and he's slowed it down and it's broken it up. It was the one moment that pulled me out. But other than that, I was, I felt something, but I couldn't actually tell you what the music was, which to me is the hallmark of a great score.
Yeah. And I think great score and also probably a great movie because I feel like if you're watching something and get more wrapped up in, like, the soundtrack, maybe it's just because the visual effects of it and, like, the movie itself isn't holding up or interesting you enough. So I feel like if you just got that enveloped in the story, it's probably because, like, all aspects of it was done well, not just the score.
Completely, completely. Good story, well visuals, well acted, and it all melded together. I mean, that's hard to do. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it takes a lot of skill and some chance and, that moment all coming together. But, I call it when I finally cracked a scene. Like there are and given the amount of music I have to write, I definitely don't crack every scene. But
Yeah.
the ones that you do when you really get inside the scene and you're like, "Oh, I nailed that one." I try to do that at least once or twice an episode just so I can really feel like, "Ah, all right, that one I really got."
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. And, just for, like, listening to music or whatever, do you have a sort of, like, 3 favorite bands or artists that you like to listen to?
Well, so funny. It's like, I don't know why, but Fleetwood Mac Rumors has come back into my paradigm, and I almost every morning I listen to that. Now, just because I just think it's one of the greatest records ever done. It's like, to me, it's like, and to know what the band was going through at the time, the strife, the breakups, and what that album was created, the circumstances that album was created under. It's just, I don't know. I put it on in the morning, it makes me feel good. I'm also I'm a huge, huge, huge Beatles fan. I mean, I could tell you almost anything about every one of their albums, like, who did what and the engineers, and it's like I've
Yeah.
studied that music so intently. And as far as modern music, I have to say I listen to a ton of film and TV scores. So, I've really been listening to after I watch an episode of The Last of Us, I always do try to listen to the score because I think, he's got since he's a guitar player, Gustavo, he's got a unique take on the way he does things. And I really love the simplicity and expressiveness of the guitar and the way he plays it. So I have been
Yeah.
listening to that a lot too. And I don't
Nice.
know, I came across this action score, Ambulance, horrible movie, amazing score. I just like that's like a score that just gets me going.
You're
So
like, "Get rid of the movie, just release it as an album and I'll be set."
totally. I'm glad you released it as an album because it's a great score.
Yeah. And just the last question that I have for you today, do you have, like, a favorite show or movie that you've composed for? And maybe if it's a show, if there's, like, one episode particularly that you liked?
So last year, there was a Shark Week episode called Great White Open Ocean, which starts with one of the most intense opening scenes that I've seen in 33 years of Shark Week, where a guy's floating in a plexiglass cage, he's surrounded by sharks, and he's studying them. And one of the sharks comes from beneath and smashes the cage. Literally, the nose came right up by his leg, pushing it
Oh my
out.
god.
It was like it's hair raising. And obviously, afterwards, he was a shark researcher and suffered from pretty severe PTSD. And we actually got to do a feature length Shark Week documentary called Great White Open Ocean. And I am incredibly proud of both the show and the work I did on the show. So, at least in my modern memory, that's the thing that if I could point to something and say that's a really good example of what's possible in my work, that would be the show.
Yeah, that's great, and I mean, what a great note to end it on with something that you're so proud of and so happy to have done.
Totally.
Um, where can people find you if they wanna, like, follow you? Any socials you have, website, basically anything you wanna promote, just shouting out right now.
Absolutely. So craigdobbin.com is my website, and there you can connect to all my socials, which I'm on Instagram under CD Scores. You can also search for Craig Dobbin, Facebook under CD Scores, LinkedIn under CD Scores, TikTok under CD Scores. So pretty much as long as you know CD Scores, you can find me. I'm beginning work on a feature film called The Tasting, which is a psychological thriller set in the high-end world of wine, which I'm really excited about. So definitely look for that coming out at the end of the year.
Yeah, I'll definitely keep an eye out for that because, you know, I'm looking forward to hear what you score for it, and also just that one line summary of it sounds really interesting. So I'll definitely keep an eye out for that. Be ready to watch it.
Awesome.
And I'll leave a link to some of that down below. So thank you again so much for coming on.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. It really was a pleasure.
Yeah, definitely.